I think that memory politics can have positive and negative links with democracy and social inclusion. And that depends largely on who is doing the memory politics and what is remembered. And so, generally speaking, you can have, if it's a positive link, I would say memory politics are used in order to deal with the past, to remember difficult periods, like, for example, in Germany, the Nazi period, but also in France, the Algerian strife for independence, and that was the whole colonial issue, and to engage into an interpretation or discussion between the population and the government about how to interpret and deal with this past, and in a positive sense but because democracy is all about debate, not giving one single interpretation, but to see the point of view of the victims, but also the point of view of those who did the nasty things at the time, and and then to find maybe new ways to look at and to reconcile, and this all with a big emphasis on democracy and on the need to have a democratic arena in order to be able to talk about all this, not to be silent and to stay silent, because being silent means that it might come up in a much more violent and almost revolutionary way, which is not good for anyone, because it will lead to conflict and it will hurt people. So this is the good way about memory politics as it is practiced by a lot of our countries after the Second World War, mainly. And then we have the bad way of doing memory politics by either authoritarian states or also by a lot of extremist political parties, the so-called populist parties, who use the memory politics to renationalize discourse and to emphasize the "we against the others" rhetoric, and to stigmatize people, and meaning, for example, the AfD, who pronounces against words against the Jews, for example, or the Italians more recently, who celebrate Mussolini, although he was a fascist, and he was discriminating against people. And so this goes into the direction of against democracy. So the link is a bad link with democracy. It's interpreting only a memory in one single way, the way that they want to interpret it. And that's also the authoritarian regimes, for example, Turkey, or in some respect also Hungary, to celebrate the past in a glorious way, and that only the nation, the Hungarian nation, the Turkish nation, or maybe now the Italian or the Swedish nations, where these extreme political parties are in power, to celebrate them as the only way and the glorious history, although the history has not been that glorious. So I think that are two different ways how to interpret how to see memory politics in relation with democracy. And what is remembered is also important for me, because this was something that we did in a research project when they was remembering the First World War in France. That's an important moment in 2019, and they remembered always the wars and the bad moments in history. And when the French and the Germans were fighting each other, all the sufferings, it was meant in a good way, but it was always about the war. And me being German, living in France, I was always shocked by the way how the French still commemorate the victory of the First World War. And when they still talk now in 2020-21, they talk about the nasty Germans, who they fought and they won against them. And I don't think that celebrating this is a good way to construct, to practice reconciliation and to feel as Europeans. I think that it is better. So we reacted against this and said, well, why not commemorate peace instead. Let's more commemorate the good moments in history when we constructed peace, when we did European integration, for example, rather than celebrating the victories or the wars. So I think this creates a lot of more social inclusion. It's more about social inclusion, also about democracy. It means that you try to find a common basis, and you remember together the good times that you had together and not the bad times. Yeah. Because I believe that it is due to the succession of crises. We have had a lot of crises, international crisis and also European crisis, which put into question a lot of things. Crisis of international terrorism, the crisis of migration, the COVID crisis. It put into question the functioning of the international system, the globalization, but also European integration process. And in times of crisis, there is often a reflex to think, well, maybe it was better in the past. and so they look into the past and then they glorify the past without realizing that the past was maybe not so glorious at all. And this we can quote examples in Germany, the so-called Ostalgie, when the Eastern Germans who now suffer from crisis or from unemployment suddenly say, well, it was much better in East Germany at the time, and they forget about all the dictatorship and the repression that they had, but it's also more general. Even the French, when they are in crisis, we have a big crisis now again in the social on the social level. People are unemployed, they are not satisfied with the government, and then they glorify the times when De Gaulle was there, or when Napoleon is celebrated. The big history, the French nation, who was the leading nation in Europe, and now they are no longer a leading nation, so maybe it was much better as it was in the past. Same goes for the United Kingdom. After Brexit, I think they realized that they have a really difficult situation, and so they try and conjure the Commonwealth, although the Commonwealth today is not at all what it used to be in times of the Commonwealth. So the problem with this glorifying the history is also that they transpose the history into the present, and that, as a historian, I can confirm that never works. You cannot say, well, we will reconstruct the Commonwealth now, because we are in a different time period and it's just not possible. But it gives to the people a kind of solution. Instead of looking into the future, they look into the past, and they believe that they can find a better future in the past, but it's never possible.